Lesson 3, the zeros of a quadratic. Your learning target is I can identify the zeros of a quadratic by factoring or completing the square. So this is a real big practice lesson. I just wanted to go through some problems with you guys. So that's why I made it a lesson, but you should be able to do this without my help. So just a reminder that zeros can also be called roots, solutions, or x-intercepts. Let's take a look at number 1. The roots of x squared minus 6x minus 16 equals 0 can be found by factoring as, so let's factor this equation right here. It tells you factoring is the method, so we don't have to go through GCF, completing the square, quadratic formula, although we should be able to get the same answer no matter what process we choose. So when we factor this, we're looking for factors of 16 factors of 16 that subtract to 6. So factors of 16, we've got, sorry, I'm a little messy here. We've got 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. So the factors that subtract to 6 are going to be 2 and 8. So we're going to double bubble. So we look at this sign to tell us if they're going to be the same signs or different. So if it multiplies to a negative 16, they have to be different signs. So we'll have an x plus and an x minus. It doesn't matter which one comes first. So we've got 2 and 8. So I usually just plug them in first and then backtrack to double check to make sure they would simplify to negative 6. So we have a positive 2 minus 8. 2 minus 8 gives us that negative 6, so we are good to go. Now that's just the factoring process. Now when we solve it, we make that T-chart, but I can't make the T-chart on the Google Doc, but we set each factor equal to 0. So if we set x plus 2 equal to 0, that means x would have to equal negative 2. X minus 8 equal to 0, which means x would have to equal 8. So my solution is negative 2 and 8. So that would be choice 3. Okay? So taking a look at number 2, it says the equation 2x minus 3, x plus 7 equals 0, has a solution set of, now this one is already factored for you. So all you have to do is make a T-chart and figure out which one is going, or which solution set's going to make sense. Pause the video and do that one on your own. Okay, check your work with my work. We should get negative 7 and 3/2 or 1.5. Okay, the next few are finding the roots of each of the following equations by factoring. So we are just practicing factoring. Now, a couple of things that you need to keep in mind, I'll just write them up here, is remember you always check for GCF first, okay? Your second step is to see if you can do dots. Remember that means we need subtraction, perfect squares, and it has to be a binomial. And then you're going to do regular trinomial factoring. Okay, if trinomial factoring doesn't work, maybe give slide, divide, slide a try. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to do, let's do A together. Let's start this off. So again, GCF. So let's look to see if we've got a GCF here. X squared minus 36 equals 0. There is no GCF we can take out, so let's check to see if we can do dots. So we would need a subtraction, which we do right there. Perfect squared, so can you take the square root of x squared? Yes, you can. Can you take the square root of 36? Yes, you can. And is it a binomial? It is, only 2 terms, so that means we can do this. So when we do dots, we double bubble. Dots is always going to have opposite signs. So we're going to have a plus and a minus. Okay, we take the square root of each piece. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 36 is 6. Okay, now it says find the roots. So we need to solve this. That's also a big hint is that it's equal to 0. So that should tell you right now that we are solving. So you might get to the point where you don't have to really do the T-chart as much. So the first factor, x plus 6, if we set that equal to 0, we'll get negative 6. The other one, we will get 6. So that is our solution set. Okay, let's take a look at letter B. Okay, GCF, no GCF. It is not a binomial, so this is going to be trinomial factoring. We know it's not slide, divide, slide because in order for that to happen, we would have to have a number in front of the x squared other than 1. So we are looking for factors of 27 that add to 12. So factors of 27 are 1 and 27, 3 and 9. The only ones that add to 12 are 3 and 9. So we're going to double bubble. We look at our last operator to tell if it's going to be same or different signs. So if it's a positive, that means it's going to be same signs. We look at the first operator to tell us what signs those are going to be. So it's going to be a plus plus. When it's the same operator, a plus and a plus, it doesn't matter where your factors go. And we have to solve it, make that t-chart. We should get -3 and -9 as our solution set. All right, let's do one more together. So looking at letter C, looking for a GCF. We do not have one here. We can't do dots because it is a trinomial. So let's try to do regular trinomial factoring like we did in B, but we can't because we have a number in front of x squared that's not 1. We have a 3. So this one is a slide, divide, slide one. So when we slide our A term over to our C term by multiplying. Oops. So that means the 3 would disappear, but we would multiply it to this end piece, which would give us a 6. Now we factor like normal. Factors of 6 that subtract to 5. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. So ones that subtract to 5, so be careful because if you're thinking add to 5, you might pick 3 and 2. But this is subtract. Factors of 6 that subtract to 5 are 6 and 1. So we're going to double bubble. If you look at that last operator, it's subtraction, so that means we need different signs. Okay, now we've got 1 and 6. I type them in first and then double check it. So 1 minus 6 gives us -5. Oh, that's not what we want. So that means I'm just going to reverse those. We want the 6 there and the 1 here. So 6 minus 1 gives us that +5. So we are good to go. Except for the fact that we are doing slide, divide, slide. So many of us forget and just stop and solve right here. We did the slide. Now we need to do the divide. So we are going to divide the 6 by our number that we originally multiplied by, which was that 3. So we have to do 6 divided by 3 and then 1 divided by 3. If we can simplify those fractions, we need to simplify them. So 6 divided by 3 gives us 2. Now 1/3 cannot be simplified, so that means we are going to slide our denominator up to be with our x over here. That should be our final factoring, okay? Now when we solve it, we should get -2, and then this one would be 1/3. If you need to separate your bubbles and your factors to actually do that solving, if you weren't sure it was 1/3 right off the bat, then you need to show your work so I can see where it's coming from. Okay? All right, I want you to try D, E, and F on your own now. Okay, check your work with my work. Be careful with D and F. They had a GCF, especially D, because GCF was the only method you had to do. Okay, and then you just had to set up your t-chart. So 10x equals 0, and we get x equals 0. 2x minus 1 would give us 1/2. Letter E was slide, divide, slide. We should get -3/2, 7/5, or -1.5, 1.4. And letter F was another GCF one. You took out the GCF, but then you could factor it normally. Okay, now here you might be like, why didn't we set 4 equal to 0? Because 4 equals 0 doesn't make any sense. If it had an X with it, then we would be able to t-chart it. But since it doesn't, we just kind of ignore that for now. All right, let's take a look at number 4. It says, consider the quadratic function y equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. It says, using your calculator, graph the function on the grid provided. Now, I understand working on the Google Doc is not going to let you graph that, so you can just use my graph as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this right down here. You can graph it on your calculator and press the graph button so you can see it visually. Okay, so this is the function graphed. Now, obviously, if I was working on paper, I would make sure we label that. So it says, state the zeros of the function by inspecting the graph. So just by looking. So zeros are the x-intercepts. So that's at -1 and 5. Now it says find the zeros algebraically by factoring and verify that your answers match. So let's take this quadratic. Okay, looking at GCF, we don't have a GCF here. We cannot do dots. So we are stuck with factoring. So factors of 5 that subtract to 4. So we've got 1 and 5. There's no other option here. So we double bubble. This operator right here tells us it needs to be opposite signs. And we've got 5 and 1. And then let's double check. So 1 minus 5 gives us -4. We're good to go there. So now we have to solve it, setting each factor equal to 0. We get -1, 5. And you can see that that matches what we stated in B. That's all we have for lesson 3. Go ahead and self-assess. This is your last lesson for the week, so you can do the practice tomorrow and your evidence of learning, our last evidence of learning on Friday. If you have questions, please let me know.